Good evening, everybody. Before we start, I'd like everybody to rise for the flag salute, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening, and a special thanks to the representatives from the FAA and the Teterboro Airport for coming here tonight and hearing our concerns. Tonight, we're going to hear from the FAA and our community at large about Teterboro Airport. I am asking that everybody remain civil and act in a civilized manner. If not, you'll be gavelled down, and if you continue to act in an uncivilized manner, you'll be asked to leave the room. If you do not leave the room, you will be escorted out of this room. This meeting has been designed for the FAA to give us their reasoning for the flight patterns which exist today, and for residents, businesses, healthcare facilities to give their opinions on how this flight pattern is affecting them. I'm going to start off real quick with my own personal opinion. As a 40-year resident of the city of Hackensack, many proponents of Teterboro have made the comment, you knew there was an airport there when you bought your house. And this is true. But that said, you cannot compare the Teterboro of today with the Teterboro of 40 years ago. It was a mostly small single and twin prop planes and a few jets mixed in. The airport has grown to become one of, if not the largest general aviation relief airports in the United States. At 400 to 500 flights coming and going a day, it is nothing like it was 40 years ago when I purchased my home. It's a quality of life issue. We all know that. People have lived with it for years in the surrounding area. The noise generated by flights have gotten worse and worse, and on a nice day, you cannot even leave your windows open if you want to have a conversation with someone or if you want to watch your television. On overcast days, the noise has increased significantly due to low cloud cover. For some reason, Sundays seem to be the worst. Sunday afternoons with planes coming on approach on average every 80 seconds for hours on end. There is one aircraft in particular which reaches decibel levels that are just ridiculous. It is a Piaggio Avante, an Italian-made aircraft which is used quite often for executive transport, and because it has a pusher type of propulsion, it is much louder than a conventional prop plane. I want to talk about our schools for a minute. My wife is a teacher here at Hiller's School right here in Hackensack. Hiller's is right in the middle of the flight path. And on warm days and hot days when the windows must be kept closed in a non-air conditioned room so the students can hear the teacher's instructions. It's sad that students and teachers must sit there with sweat dripping off them in order to get an education because air traffic noise is so loud. And it's unacceptable. I've seen it firsthand, and I wonder how anybody would feel if it was their child or grandchild that had to go through that. Another issue that's now coming to the forefront is safety. We had this accident recently a few months ago. Unfortunately, we lost 2 lives. I'm very concerned about the safety of our area. From 1980 to now, there have been 12 documented plane crashes from either landing or takeoffs from Teterboro Airport. There have been 20 fatalities and 28 serious injuries. And as traffic increases, those odds will go up. The interesting point I found that from 1981 to 1999, there was 1 accident of those 12. From 1999 to 2017, another 18 years, there were 11. You do the math. We're averaging 1.6 or 1 accident every 1.6 years. So every year and a half to 2 years, we can count on a plane crash with the way we've been going. The question you're going to hear quite often tonight is why fly over one of the most densely populated areas in Bergen County? We have high rises, a very large medical center, 4 schools in the landing pattern, and we're just trying to understand the logic. And that's what we're going to hear tonight is their logic on this. I look forward to hearing from everybody tonight, and I ask again that everybody keep it civil, all right? We're here to find solutions and work together, so let's play nice in the sandbox. And with that, I'd like to now introduce the Deputy Mayor of the City of Hackensack, or I'm going to introduce Fred Dressel and Renee Spann, co-chairs of the Teterboro Aircraft Noise Abatement Advisory Committee, TANAAC.
Good evening, and welcome to Hackensack as well. I see many faces out here from the last TANAAC meeting that was held in Teterboro in April, when the FAA agreed to have this meeting right here in Hackensack. I want to begin by giving a very brief recap of why tonight's meeting is so important. Originally, Teterboro Airport was home to small propeller aircraft, and over the years, this use has been expanded to include hundreds of corporate and private business jets. Many of the towns surrounding the airport have been raising issues of noise, pollution, and safety for many years via the TANAAC Forum. For these residents, their only hope for a successful resolution lies in the hard work of this TANAAC committee, and for that, we thank them. These aircraft now fly over the most densely populated street in all of Bergen County, Prospect Avenue in Hackensack, which is home to many high-rise apartment and condo buildings, as well as Hackensack University Medical Center. We believe that this creates an imminent public safety danger and that every possible alternative flight path should be explored to protect the public. TANAAC recommended testing an alternate flight path that would move air traffic approximately 1.5 miles west of the current flight path to follow Route 17. The FAA agreed to a 6-month trial of this new flight path. Much to our dismay, we heard that the FAA is abandoning this trial, and we want to know exactly why this is happening. There were many issues raised at the last TANAAC meeting, including, why was this an optional flight plan and not a mandatory trial? We heard that this flight plan was used very infrequently, only about 200 times in 6 months. Second question, was this small number of flights an adequate sample size to collect data and reach an objective decision? Thirdly, why would the FAA choose a path over Hackensack University Medical Center, which also has a heliport, and the most densely populated street in all of Bergen County? The recent crash in Karlstad only raises our concerns even more. What if that crash had been on Prospect Avenue? How many lives would have been lost? Our objectives for this evening are the following: to learn why the alternate flight path is being abandoned by the FAA and what data was collected and analyzed to support this decision. Secondly, two-way communication to inform the FAA of the quality of life and public safety issues that the current flight path presents to Hackensack and the surrounding towns. Third, if this alternate flight path is truly unacceptable for scientific reasons, we want the FAA to continue searching and exploring other avenues to protect the public and our communities. Our expectations for tonight are twofold. One, we're looking for a commitment from the FAA to continue to work towards a solution for these serious issues, and perhaps include doing a second noise study at Hiller School that John referred to. A noise study was done at Jackson Avenue School, and there were changes to windows, etc., in that school to abate that noise problem. I believe one was also done at Hiller School. This was years ago, and I think they very by a slight margin missed that threshold, but we know the noise has been increasing, so we're asking for another study at Hiller School, which is called appropriately because it's on the hill where the descent is very prominent. And second expectation is a commitment for city officials. And I think we need to look into a potential building height moratorium in that area, because until decisions are made, I don't think we can afford to put buildings of that height in that area and only add to the safety concerns and safety issues that are there. And this council is committed to do whatever it takes to cooperate and guarantee the safety of its residents. With that, I'll turn it over to Fred Dressel and Renee Spiam from the TANAAC and from Teterboro Airport for their comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy.
Good evening, and I want to thank the town of Hackensack for providing this facility for us to have the meeting. We agreed to it because I guess TANAAC started all this with the request of, I think it was about 10 or 12 years ago, for the FAA to take a look at the approach and departures directed at the hospital. If those of you who don't know much about TANAAC started about 30 years ago, voluntarily. A few mayors got together down in South Bergen here, probably 12 of us at one point in time. We met a few times, and then once we determined and showed the people that we were serious about what we were trying to do, the Port Authority adopted us, and we did we use their facilities and their help in conducting our meetings. And we have been fruitful in a lot of ventures and getting the airport to at least open a dialogue with us. And that's what we have here for tonight, to create a dialogue of intelligent discussion with everybody's best interest. TANAAC is you. TANAAC represents towns that are ill affected by the impact of the airport, especially the quality of life, noise and air pollution. So we are you. We're with you. We are your voice, whether you've heard us or not. And I'm talking to people of Hackensack. And we've always had a member, a resident of Hackensack on our committee. So we're here tonight to facilitate the discussion, the dialogue that's been generated, and it's a child of the discussions we've had in the past. I would hope, as the mayor talked, to have a civil dialogue. People who make a profession out of directing safe air flight traffic and safety of the people are here to make a presentation. They are neither for or against you, but they are dedicated to providing safe flights for everybody below and in the air and below us. So I have no further problem with bringing up the people from the FAA to make a comment. But one thing I will say is that for the sake of sensitivity and the timing, this meeting is for the change to the flights directed at the hospital. We'll not have any discussion of the unfortunate situation that happened in Karlstadt with the plane coming down. That is not part of the discussion, or is it on the agenda for discussion? So with that, those people from the FAA, I will turn that over to them, or Renee, if you have anything further to say.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, but I'll introduce Gary Palm. He's the Air Traffic Control Tower Manager at Teterboro Airport, and he will introduce himself and colleagues from the FAA.
That's all.
That's all. Right. Okay, good. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for having us this evening. My name's Gary Palm, as introduced by Renee. I'm the FAA Air Traffic Manager at Teterboro Tower. I've been there or have 17 years of experience working Teterboro Tower. 10 of those, the last 10 years, almost 10 years, I have held the position of the Air Traffic Manager. During the last 10 years, I've also been an active member and represented the FAA at almost every TANAAC meeting that's been had, and have worked very hard to collaboratively resolve questions and issues submitted by the local community members. Along with me tonight, this evening, are several other FAA representatives from the New York, New Jersey FAA management structure, and I'd like to let them introduce themselves if they could.
Morris Stensland, New York District Manager.
Jim Hayden, New York Trade-Com. Jim Peters, FAA Health Affairs. Joey Metters, Operations Support Group. Chris Burns, Flight Standards, Eastern Region.
Thank you very much. Everybody knows we're here tonight as a result of the last TANAAC meeting that was held in April, and at the bequest of Deputy Mayor Kathy Constrino, did I pronounce that correctly? Also representatives from the condo and co-op board in Hackensack and the general public who were seeking answers from us, the FAA, about the quiet visual approach for runway 19er, and some additional concerns about the air traffic operations at Teterboro Airport. So with me tonight, I have representatives from the New York TRACON, Mr. Mike Porcello, and if the New York TRACON, the terminology, that is the air traffic facility, radar facility, that provides radar services to all of the traffic in and out of the New York Metroplex, which consists of all the major airports in the area, Teterboro, Morristown, Caldwell also, and up as far as Westchester and further north. He will provide a presentation of how the airports operate and how we share airspace and work together each and every day. Additionally, a representative from the Flight Standards District Office, Mr. John DeFilippis, will provide a short briefing on the ILS to runway 19er, the design, the operation, and the safety of the system. And lastly, yours truly, I'll provide the final presentation on the history of the quiet visual for runway 19er and the accumulated test data used in the decision to discontinue the procedure. So, Michael, do you want to present your, one thing I would like to ask everybody, we have 3 segments. If they'd be kind enough to hold their questions till the end of each segment, and we hope to maximize the opportunity for everybody to ask the questions they'd like.
You want me to use that microphone? Is that a laser pointer?
Mike, is that on? Check it, so. Yeah, can you turn that on?
All right. Well, my name is Mike Porcello. As Gary mentioned, I work at the New York Tracon, along with Jim Hayden, who's in the audience, and appreciate you guys affording us the opportunity to come here this evening and tell you a little bit about what we do. You can go to the next one. All right. So, our facility's objective: movement of air traffic safely and efficiently. Or I think we're cut off a little bit at the end, but that's okay. All right, we try and balance air traffic demands with system capacity to ensure a safe, orderly, and expeditious flow of air traffic with an eye towards minimizing delays.
Can we turn the lights down a little bit?
There's always questions about how runway selection is made. Factors that we typically depend upon: runway availability, is the runway open or closed? The wind, more often than not, the wind is going to dictate the direction that we can land and take off in. Weather is a prime component for us, for an airport like Teterboro especially. The approaches that we can run are dictated by the weather that is happening at that time. Operational efficiency, and then on the bottom there, noise considerations. Within our airspace, 5 of the bigger airports in the United States. We have Westchester in there. I know some people don't think that that place is particularly busy, but it is. Obviously, Kennedy, LaGuardia, and Newark are the ones that garner most of the attention, but Teterboro just as busy as probably any airport, I'd say within the 15 to 25 range as far as top 30 in the United States. Those 5 airports for us generate over 5,000 IFR operations. To put that in perspective, that would probably be the equivalent of having an Atlanta next to a Chicago. So, it's busy. Those 5 major airports fit within a 17-mile circle. Believe me, that is very, very close together. A condition that doesn't really exist anyplace else in the world. And I know they seem pretty far apart when you're driving back and forth from them. But in fact, they're not. They're very close, and it presents us with a number of challenges. In addition to those 5 airports, we actually provide approach control services to 50 airports and heliports within our airspace. Gary mentioned Westchester to Teterboro to Newark. We're actually just about north of Princeton, south of Kingston, out to Montauk, and south of Hartford. And a busy day for us would be about 7,000 operations. The last couple of days, somewhere between 62 and 6,300. Our airspace overlaps, and this causes challenges for us within the facility and with managing the airports. As you can see, the blue indicates the Newark sector's airspace. They're responsible for Newark and Teterboro, as well as Morristown, Caldwell, and some others. You could hit that. LaGuardia sector responsible for Westchester, LaGuardia, Danbury, and some other small airports to the north, directly on top of Newark. And if we put Kennedy's airspace up there as well, I think maybe you get a little bit of an idea what the interaction is. Newark primarily operating, or almost exclusively operating, west of the Hudson, right? We put some traffic slides together just to paint a little bit of a picture here. That is the ILS 19 coming in from the north. We go to the next one. We'll see what departures look like coming off. Again, everything west of the Hudson. We'll see Newark's traffic on top of it. And so Newark arrivals coming directly over the top of Teterboro. You can go. Newark departures, a fair amount of which actually go back into LaGuardia's airspace, back over the top of the arrivals and the departures to Teterboro and the arrivals to Newark. See traffic coming into Kennedy. Kennedy's traffic is unique. That traffic enters our airspace at one point, flight level 190, about 24 miles to the northwest of Kennedy. And the air traffic controllers in the Kennedy sector are responsible for stepping those aircraft down and getting them into the airport, which is actually pretty complicated. And that's a little bit of what the departure picture looks like. As you can tell by most of what you're seeing, most of our operations, especially the departures obviously, are in the western portion of our airspace. When you talk about busy facilities or busy airports, more often than not, they sit in places in the country where they're accessible from 4 different directions. That's LaGuardia arrivals, and you can get into the next one too. And LaGuardia departures, it is every bit what it appears to be. It is a lot of airplanes in a very narrow corridor without a lot of wiggle room or a lot of options as far as what it is we're working. And we put the Westchester stuff in there too. There's a video up next, right? Yeah, so we put together a video for you that is exactly what those tracks represent. It's a lot of dots and some airplanes moving around. It is a fairly accurate representation of what you would see if you were walking through our building and went from sector to sector. Not in their altitudes and speeds, but I think you get the idea. You know, at any given moment, it's very busy, and there's a lot happening. And when we talk about servicing airports, while we would certainly like to have more options than we do, as you can imagine, we're fairly constrained by what happens around you. We put some numbers up there just because we had some extra room in our presentation, I guess. We're getting busier every year. You might see some dips in some of the traffic, but in fact what's happened is aircraft at the major airports anyway have gotten larger, right? With population increases, airlines see a need to upgauge their aircraft. And even in those years where it looks like a traffic count had gone down and come back up again, the passenger counts actually continued to go up. And when we look at Teterboro, we could see a pretty significant increase from 2012 to 2016. And for us, this is just a little bit of chest bumping. We're busy. It's 2 million operations a year for us. The overwhelming majority of that is commercial traffic. Unlike some of the other TRACONs that are out there, you can go ahead. The only other one that's really close to us in terms of volume is Southern California, and they do work a lot of general aviation and military aircraft. Don't handle the same volume of passengers that we do, and they have a little more airspace to work with. And I'll spare you the last one because it's just more of that. So.
That's it. Thank you, Michael. Does anybody have any questions for Mike at this time? To the end, or you want to do each segment so people could ask?
Do it by the segment?
Yeah, do it by this.
Billy, you got a question right there.
All right. Anybody who has a question on this segment, please come forward. You have 3 minutes. We're allowing everybody 3 minutes because we have a large crowd tonight, instead of the normal 5.
I have a question about timing. I see that you have a lot of planes moving through traffic together. What is the timing between planes for landing at Teterboro?
So for Teterboro, we don't necessarily separate by time, but by distance. And more often than not, it would be a 3-mile interval, volume dependent.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There was somebody else, right?
Anybody else on this segment?
Take this one if you like.
You mentioned noise, but I think our prime concern is safety. You know, these and TRACON, I don't know if TRACON is primarily concerned about safety. I think the audience is primarily concerned about safety. Pollution and noise is secondary, but you're bringing planes down the most heavily populated area with 4 or 5 schools and a Hackensack University Medical Center. That's our concern, really, safety. And I don't know if you're addressing that.
Okay, so I think that's what we led off with, right? Was safe, orderly, and expeditious, safe movement of traffic.
Well, what are we doing about it, though? What are we doing about our concerns of safety
Relative to what, sir?
relative to changing the situation so we feel
Okay.
more comfortable, so we don't have this danger hanging over our head? You're bringing planes along the most populated area, and nothing's been done for years, so we'd like to see some action.
Okay, and I think the group is here to address your concerns.
All right. So you will be. Okay.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, we'll address some
That's
of
in the next
those
segment, sir.
questions in reference to what you brought up, sir. Yes, sir.
Safety, can I comment?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Just one quick question regarding nighttime versus daytime. Is Teterboro more heavily trafficked during the night than other airports?
No.
In reference to safety, I live directly across from the hospital, and I see the helicopter, emergency helicopter landing constantly because of emergencies. I have on video today that a plane was going over the helicopter that was landing, the emergency helicopter that was landing, and came within less than 500 feet of the, of the helicopter, while the helicopter was landing at the hospital. I have a video for that. I sent that video to Paul Berger of the Bergen Record, and he said he was going to contact the FAA regarding that. And I don't know, Paul, if you ever received it, but I have a copy if you're interested in it.
I'll be glad to look at whatever video you have in reference to Michael's segment. Your question
Yeah, in
is-
reference to safety.
Yeah, and
No, it was, to me, I consider it a near miss, you know, because it was less than 500 feet above the helicopter that was landing at the hospital. And if you'd like to view it, you can take my phone and view it.
Sure, I'll be glad to look at it, but we do look at traffic separated by 500 feet every single day.
Yeah, but
Some of
this
the
went
requirements.
This went over while the helicopter was landing
And
at the
that's
helipad.
very possible. Traffic is exchanged between aircraft.
Yes.
They have visual on each other.
I don't think he
and-
saw it because the helicopter was low and the plane was higher.
And believe me, they've been issued traffic on each other. That is procedure, that is safe, it's a safe operation, it's an acceptable operation, and 500 feet by visual means is a pretty good guess, I would imagine.
I would say it could even be
But,
less than
we-
500 feet
we
because
do
I think you
provide-
said that it was, that the planes go over the hospital at 200 feet above it, above the roof.
They've been issued traffic on each other, more than likely.
I can recall,
Yeah.
I can recall the FAA at one time when there was a near miss at one of the airports. They said the plane came in within 500 feet of another plane while it was landing. They called that a near miss.
It depends on what the operation is, if it's an IFR operation or a VFR operation. There are several different factors that provide different safety or safe separation standards between each aircraft. And what is being applied at that particular point in time is a safety procedure. I cannot comment exactly what transpired by what you saw, but the
Well, I have it on
probability...
video if you'd like to view it.
I'll gladly look at it for you, but the probability is that the controllers, as Mike said, are there to provide a safe operation. And they utilize safety rules and regulations and safety standards to ensure that safety factor is maintained. I can't say what went on with that particular situation, other than the probability is that they were using an applicable safety standard of separation
Gentlemen,
to
we're at
separate those
we're
aircraft.
at 3 minutes. Thank you.
Did you want to view it?
Next, please.
I will later, sir, if you'd like.
Marianne Gargano. I live on Heath Place, right in the flight path of your planes. I'd just like to know, how come the Route 17 redirect was not looked into further. It was apparently just stopped. Is there
I'm
a
going to be
reason?
addressing that with my presentation. So
Okay.
if you'd like to ask me that question after that presentation,
Okay, that's fine.
I'll do my best to do
Because I know
that.
Mawa, where the planes are like way up, somehow they got their planes rerouted. I live on Heath Place. The noise level, you can't hear yourself outside on a Sunday afternoon. It's like incoming. My grandson, who's 3.5, told his class, my nanny lives at the airport because it's so bad. And it's not only coming over my house, it comes from the other direction around my house, coming from the airport past my house. So we're getting it, oops, sorry, I'll pick it up. We're getting it in like 3 or 4 different directions. And when you say they don't come at night, come by my house at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning.
I didn't say they don't come at night, I just said they weren't as busy at night.
Oh, really? Sometimes it's so bad that I have a bunch of my neighbors here. We've actually all ran out at the same time because I swear to God, they were coming through my window. So when you say things like this, you have to be there to actually experience it. And with that PowerPoint presentation that you had, the amount of traffic just goes to show why everybody is here. It's like putting a 10-pound bag of flour in a 1-pound bag. Maybe if you can't redirect, maybe you should have an ancillary airport and take some of that traffic out of there and put it somewhere else. But something's got to be done because not only is it a safety issue, it's a way of life issue. I mean, you can't sit outside and just enjoy your house. And I've lived there for 40 years. So I didn't like that callous little remark about, well, you shouldn't have bought your house 40 years ago. Well, 40 years ago, who the heck knew? Did you know? Nobody knew.
No, we didn't make that.
I don't think
Well, whoever made that
I don't think I
remark.
said that.
Yeah.
I don't know, somebody made
Somebody
that
said
remark,
that to
and I
me,
did not
Mary Ann.
Huh?
Somebody said that to me.
Yeah, I didn't appreciate that because 40 years ago, I bought my house in a nice, quiet area, and then suddenly all hell broke loose. So that was really a very callous remark, and that kind of gives me an inkling of where this is going to be going.
If I could make one statement to that,
Sure.
you did not hear that out of anybody from the FAA. That
Well, I
is
don't know
not
who
going to
said
be
it because
presented.
I'm sitting in the back,
Yeah.
I can't see. But I did
Mary Ann,
hear it.
I had said it, somebody had said it to me.
Oh, I'm
When
sorry.
I was talking
I
about,
apologize.
when I was talking about the air traffic and the noise,
But that's a very
they said, well, you
callous
bought
remark.
a house near an airport. I'm like,
Yeah.
40
No,
years
I didn't
ago.
buy a house near an
Yeah,
airport.
yeah.
The
I bought the
airport,
same time you did.
Obviously, yes,
Yep.
directs their planes towards my house, so it's a little bit different. But I'd like to see something done, because, I mean, I'm paying $11,000 in taxes, which I know most people here are also. And I mean, I don't ask for much, and I understand we have to share. I understand
Right,
that.
Mayor?
You have a busy airport, people
You
need
went to
get
3
from-
minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep, that's right.
Point eight,
You
point
you-
three.
You can
you'll
come
get
up
another
again,
chance.
though.
Another chance.
She can take my 3 minutes.
Next, please.
Just a general question. Couldn't see all the numbers in the back, but those were basically growth charts showing the increases. At what point is the area completely saturated where you couldn't accept any more growth? In terms of a percentage, I mean, we all have a feel for how busy it is. So if we had to say how many more flights would make this area completely saturated, what would that be?
So from our end of it, right, not something that the air traffic is in a position to regulate, right? And I did put the stuff up there for a reason, so we're not hiding the fact that there have been increases, and they're significant, right?
Right.
But that's probably what you're gonna wind up working with that TANAAC group to figure out is, what is acceptable and what is not.
Okay, then let me say, and I don't know if you're the right person to ask the question to, so I appreciate that answer. At what point can the air traffic controllers reach their maximum ability to manage the airspace in the area in terms of number of flights leaving and going, coming in the 4 or 5 airports that you showed?
So that's what we're in the process of doing now, right? Is we work with the procedures we have to manage the volume that we have. What we know is at some point the volume drives delays, right? As much as I'm sure everybody would like to come and go at certain times, as the volume continues to increase, those flights get pushed into different hours.
Is there a threshold to volume?
Per day, per hour, or?
Per day, per hour, per airspace?
Yeah, it depends, right? It depends on the weather, it depends on the runway configuration, it depends on whether or not the airport has arrivals or departures. You know, when we look at that airport, I would tell you a busy arrival hour at that airport is probably, you know.
So is it acceptable for an airport to be running every 3 minutes in and out? Is that something that the airports can handle if the volume of people that needed planes fulfilled that need?
That would probably be more of a regulatory question. Like I said,
Is
we're
that-
just air traffic controllers.
Is there someone here that can answer that?
I'll venture to answer
Okay.
some of it in respect to that. Of course, the runways are just like the highway. You know, at what point do you reach saturation? All right. As Mike explained, there are many different ways to look at that question, but I think I understand what you're getting at. When we reach maximum capacity, when we reach that threshold that we cannot take any more airplanes because we lose the safety mechanism between each arrival and each departure. There are procedures in place from an air traffic perspective that'll reduce those arrival rates and departure rates to an acceptable level. If you're looking for me to say that you reach a certain point and then everything stops, well, it may stop, but what happens, it ends out getting mitigated by reestablishing separation standards, and you end up with delays.
If I may, one follow-up. Do you
it
strive to have as many flights as possible?
From an air traffic perspective, we don't have to strive. We are there to provide the service, and we react to the demand. We don't create
Thank
the
you.
demand.
No, you'll get another, everybody will get another shot. It's just this session. Next, please.
Frank Albolino, I'm one of Mary Ann's neighbors. I don't know when to ask this question, when it's going to come up, but I heard or read somewhere that the fees at Teterboro are cheaper than other airports. Is that why we have so many planes flying in and out of there?
Teterboro doesn't accept commercial flight, or doesn't have commercial flights. I don't know what the fees are. It's not an air traffic or FAA responsibility at Teterboro.
Okay, and I know at one time a former Congressman, Steve Rothman, was trying to stop the flights between 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. and 6 a.m. in the morning. Is that a possibility?
I'm not familiar with, is
He hasn't been a
Congressman Rothman,
yeah, he
excuse
hasn't
me.
been a congressman for
Yeah, I'm not,
6, 7, 8 years.
familiar or recollect that. Renee, would you happen to recollect that?
Yes, so from an airport perspective, we have limits on how much we can control air traffic coming to our airports. At Teterboro Airport, we have a very stringent noise mitigation program that includes curfews and nighttime hours. We cannot stop aircraft from flying in and out of the airport, but we have been fortunate enough to have a flying community that's very cooperative with the airport. So the percentage of operations that we have at Teterboro during nighttime hours is very low. And I know that, as a resident in the area, it's probably not something that's readily visible to you, but we have probably about 5% of the operations at the airport that happen between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. But we are very limited. We can't tell an operator who wants to fly in or out of Teterboro that you cannot do that.
Thank you very much.
Regina DePasqua, Parker Avenue. I just have a quick question. Teterboro had been known as a reliever airport. Does it still have that designation, or is it now a destination?
Good point.
Well, it doesn't have scheduled airline service. So as a destination for the commercial or general public, I would say no. a destination for the business community? I would say yes.
I'm pretty sure there are regular flights to Martha's Vineyard. Even though it's not considered commercial, there are regularly that you could.
They do have seasonal operations that are booked, but again, it is basically, it's not an advertised.
It doesn't run on a
commercial
published,
flight.
doesn't run on a published schedule like that's readily available to the public.
But there is a route. There's a regular route, and there are regular flights and regular times.
No.
But just because,
No, there is no regular routes. Well, excuse me. There's a regular route to fly to Martha's Vineyard, yes. There's regular routes to fly to Boston, Maine, Los Angeles, Las Vegas.
they're pretty
There's a
much the
regular
same
route.
time during high season, which is now, which would be a scheduled flight,
You
even
would.
if it's not publicized.
You would probably see more flights to Martha's Vineyard, but it's not a commercial flight that you can, as the general public, call and say, I want tickets to this flight.
Sure can. Been there, done that. Sure
To
can.
my knowledge, am I incorrect at that?
It's a little difficult to explain, but the FAA has certain definitions of what commercial scheduled flights are. That is what we do not allow at Teterboro. And in our rules and regs, what it says is that we do not allow scheduled air carrier flights, and the term air carrier is key because
It's semantics then.
well, no, it's not semantics because air carrier operations are different from the general aviation kinds of operations we have at Teterboro Airport. So we don't have airlines that publish a schedule that says, we're flying from Teterboro to destination X 3 times a week. This is the fare for it, and you, the general public, without some other kind of arrangement, can get a seat on this flight. It's a little cumbersome to describe, but
It's just more complicated than a commercial flight, but it can be done.
And it
But my
and it costs a lot more
initial
money.
question, is it still considered a reliever airport?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to address that. Yes, we are a reliever airport.
We need the relief, okay?
That's what you wanted to hear.
Before we move
I
on,
didn't catch that one.
before we move on, only because I think a couple of folks, the number 500 feet came up and a lot of talking about that. Could we go back to a couple of those pictures? I mean, let's just take a look at a couple of these pictures because, I didn't measure, but I don't believe that this is 500 feet away from some of these buildings. If Greg just takes a second to put some of them up. And some of these are the hospital buildings, is that's acceptable over a hospital? Let's go to the next.
Especially when emergency helicopters.
This was around our county building. Another one at the hospital. Keep going. And these are just recent, another one at the hospital. This just is a couple of residents sent in the last couple of days. Another one at the hospital. This is between the two buildings. You want to see that there, between 2 apartment buildings? You have a jet?
Mm-hmm.
Any type of turbulence, air resistance, air pocket, we've all been on a plane when there's been issues. Why are we doing this? This is, an accident waiting to happen. And we have to address this. This is certainly not within 500 feet. And this goes on every day. And as far as frequency, I live on the last block in Hackensack towards Maywood, so I guess I'm kind of in the valley, so I'm not even up on the hill. I'm a single-family home, so I'm certainly not experiencing the noise to the effect that these folks are. But I do have to tell you that if I want to watch television, I cannot have a window open in my house because I cannot hear television. And I said, I'm just going to go sit on my deck, and I'm going to really try and pick a time that I think there shouldn't be a lot of air traffic. I'm going to time it. So I picked a Tuesday afternoon at 1:30 in the afternoon, and I sat with my phone. And I sat out there for 45 minutes. And it was exactly every 60 seconds, there was another plane. And I'm not talking about, there were other planes intersecting. I'm talking about, I'm right in the flight path to go towards the hospital. I'm just talking every 60 seconds for 45 minutes in the middle of the day on a Tuesday afternoon, there was another aircraft. And I know, I've lived in my house for 44 years. So I certainly know that this has not been going on, and it is getting worse and worse every year. And I'm not complaining about the noise and the pollution. I'm concerned about those pictures. I'm concerned. I've been at that hospital. I've been outside that hospital when helicopters are landing, and I agree with the individual that was there. I was on the street one day and I saw what looked dangerously close to me when the helicopter was landing. And these are bringing in critically ill patients. These are things that cannot be scheduled and planned. And we have choices. We have to have choices. And we're waiting to hear why this was abandoned, but we need to just look at that. We cannot live with this. Sorry, next person.
Before we go to the next segment, I just had a couple questions. I was under the impression that when an emergency helicopter was landing at the hospital, that air traffic was diverted and held off in that area until that was taken care of, so that you couldn't have a possibility of a mishap. That's why I was surprised when that gentleman said that. And my other question is, how will we find out how many passengers are on a plane? Is there a manifest? Yes. Because you'll have possibly 30, 40 person jet that holds 30 or 40 passengers. And could that be landing with 2 people on it? Is that possible? Because to me, that seems like ridiculous that 2 corporate people can, create that scenario and cause this, grief for us. Just to land at Teterboro. It's just, I can see if their planes are packed and there's a need, a little more, but if you're flying a few people in a plane that holds 30 people, that just seems wrong to me. And, Gary made the comment about runways and highways are the same. Not even close. The cars don't fall out of the sky if there's a problem. Okay? Cars crash and that's it. They're not falling on top of our buildings. But my last question, and it goes back to the commercial flights out of Teterboro, is there a possibility that Frontier Air is coming into Teterboro? Because that I heard actually today. I don't know if anybody here can answer that. I don't even know.
Mayor,
I've never heard of Frontier Air in my life.
Let me try to answer those. I may have to have you repeat them first. In reference to emergency aircraft, again, applicable separation standards are required, and that's what we do as an air traffic control facility. We provide the required safe separation standards at that particular point in time. So there is a point at one time or a different occasion where different separation standards may be required. In other words, if we needed to hold a particular aircraft out because of an emergency operation, we would do that, okay? I'll jump to Frontier Airlines. From Teterboro Air Traffic, we don't have anything to do with any type of negotiations of any airline, but personally, I haven't heard of it.
Okay.
I smiled a little bit at one of the statements you made because it reminded me of another time I worked at Gabreski at one time, which is West Hampton Beach, and we had a very prominent businessman who flew a 727 into the airport, and on that aircraft was his maid, 2 children, and 1 dog. So there are those, I guess, those in the flying world that do have that ability. But more directly to answer your question about Teterboro, there are aircraft that do have the capability of holding 20, maybe 30 people. Most of those business jets, I don't know about all of them, but they're set up in a way to be a little bit more personal. However, they do come in with 3, 4 people. But air traffic, again, we don't track that. That's not our job.
I know that's not your issue.
That's not our job. But I think you had one more question for me that I'll try to answer.
No, I was just talking about the runways and highways being.
Oh, runway. That analogy, I was just trying to say that, there's a saturation point. When you're on a highway and there's very little traffic, you can just move along, everybody's fine, and you haven't reached capacity yet. Now, when something happens on the highway, or if you just have that volume of traffic, you reach a capacity limit. That's the only analogy I was trying to draw between the two.
Well, my question would be, when traffic stops on a highway, it's called bumper to bumper. I don't know what you call it when it's in the air. So,
So-
Anybody else on this segment before we move on to the next segment? Seeing none, let's go to the next segment.
Okay, John, do you do the presentation from the Flight Standards District Office? And to remind everybody, he will do a short presentation on the ILS system for runway 19er.
Oh, you want the lights on? I'm sorry. Thanks, Andy.
So, good evening, everyone. I was asked to just talk about the ILS system, which is, it's basically a procedure that pilots use. Part of the FAA, I'm the pilot experience. I've flown into Kennedy, International, I've flown all over the world, so I have experience with these systems. Okay, go to the first slide. So the ILS system's been in service for well over 50 years. And basically what it gives you is it gives you a lateral guidance as well as a glide slope, a vertical guidance. It's considered a precision approach. No, next one. And as a pilot, if we're flying in, this is what's called an approach plate. And this gives us all different things on the about this procedure. What we can go down to, if we're looking at altitudes, I mean, I'll just touch on it basically. You know, what we can go down to, our minimums for when the weather's low. We have frequencies up here. We have our missed approach if we have to go around. We have our frequency for our localizer that talks about it. And that's what a pilot will have next to them as they're flying this approach. Okay, some things, it's a basic instrument that's used internationally. Everywhere in the world, an ILS is used. And it's the most commonly flown approach. It's one of the most precise and accurate navigations to the runway. We have, with ILSs, this is not at Teterboro, but at Kennedy, where you can land the airplane with zero visibility. And, you know, that's done throughout the area, but we don't have that at Teterboro. We just have a standard approach. It's the lowest approach that gets you to the touchdown, which is a height above the runway, okay, with crossing line. And it gives you a vertical guidance and a stabilized approach. So some of these sources I've used are the pilot's instrument flying handbook and an instrument flying handbook. So every pilot goes through training and learns how to use that from when you first get your private pilot's license. You start to train in instruments, and this is where they start to learn about this procedure. So this is the procedure that flies over the hospital, which is, I just did a quick Google Earth, and you're looking at about 2 miles out from the runway on a 3-degree glide slope, which is what Teterboro's ILS is. You're at about 600 feet. It's a 3-to-1. That's how you know. For every mile, it's 300 feet. So that's just some facts for you, just so you know. So the pilots are precisely accurate flying in, and they're on there. And that's my presentation.
You have questions?
Yep.
While someone's coming, I'll ask a question.
Okay.
Okay, so if we have 2 flight paths into runway 19, whether it's the current one or the alternate flight path,
Well, actually,
how does that affect
there's
the
more than
ILS?
there's more than one approach. And if you want to just say how many approaches there are to.
Well, I'm just talking
procedures?
about the 2 flight paths that we're concerned with here tonight.
Oh,
One
okay.
which is coming over Prospect Avenue into runway 19.
Right.
And the alternate flight path, which is coming over Route 17 into.
Which is that quiet visual.
Have you looked at both of those? And are either one or the other or both enabled to use the ILS landing?
I think they are using the ILS landing,
Yes.
correct? When they're.
I mean, we're gonna cover the quiet visual, but at this time, I mean, I'll just tell you, the quiet visual is NOTAMed out, which means it's not for use.
When it was in use, were they able to use the ILS system
Yes.
for landing?
Oh, yes. Okay.
That's my question.
Right,
Okay.
and there's other
So,
approaches
right,
too as well.
But the system you described
Right.
would be appropriate for either one of the flight paths that we're talking about tonight. Is that correct?
Say that one more time?
All right.
Let me clarify.
You could have an ILS approach with either one of these flight paths that we're talking about tonight?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. Let
Have
me,
the ILS approach with the one that comes over Prospect Avenue?
The ILS
Explain it to
approach is, well, the ILS approach is designed with specific standards. Personally, I don't know what all those standards are. I'm not an expert in that field. But the experts are the ones that design the approach. They have to meet regulatory guidance and limitations as to how the system works. And you can't just take one thing and move it over 5 degrees or move it over 10 degrees.
You're trying to explain the question. Just answer the question.
Yeah.
When they fly the flight path that they currently are flying now over Prospect Avenue, the system you described.
Correct.
Is that in use?
Yes.
Okay. When they did the trial over last summer, when they flew the alternate flight path over Route 17.
The quiet visual.
The quiet visual.
Mhm.
Were they able to also use the ILS landing?
Yes.
well,
One's saying no, one's saying yes.
no, because I think I'm not sure if you're confusing it, that can the ILS just be moved? No, it's on a
I'm asking that
path.
question. I'm asking.
Are they both available at the same time?
No, I'm not asking that question. I'm
Right.
saying, when they fly the flight path that we're using right now, this is how they land. Yes, they have an instrument, they get fly scope, they get signals, and they're able to follow that signal and have a correct landing. Yes? Okay. I'm just asking, when they flew the quiet visual, did they also have that capability, or did they not? That's the only question I'm asking. I'm not asking if they did it at the same time, I'm not asking any of those things. Did they have that same capability available to them when they flew that quiet visual approach?
Some aircraft don't have the same capability.
Then they wouldn't have it either one. I'm a plane that's flying today, I'm coming over Prospect Avenue, and I can have an ILS landing, okay? Last year when I was at trial, I'm the same aircraft, I had the same capability. When I'm making my landing, could I also have the same capability?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
so really what you're presenting today, it's not preferential to one or the other of the landers.
Right.
I could have this capability
No.
with either one if I
Okay.
had the right aircraft, yes?
Well,
Yes, yes.
it's not as simple yes and no
None of it's
question.
simple. It's an answer.
Answer, excuse me.
Okay, all
If
right, we're
you're
not gonna
saying-
argue. We'll just-
No, what
just say
I would like to answer it
Okay.
and understand your question clearly
My
and
question is,
succinctly.
we're presenting to the public so they understand
Mhm.
what isn't, that we have a capability within certain aircraft, okay, that we have an instrument that helps us land effectively, that stabilizes the landing, that lines the landing up, and makes it easy for the pilot to land, in a nutshell, yes?
Correct.
There is such a capability, and that's what this gentleman just presented.
Correct.
Correct, okay. I guess my question is why he's presenting or why he's talking about that, because what we're here to talk about is the difference between one flight path and another flight path, yes? So my question was, if I'm an aircraft that has that capability, is there a difference? When I flew the standard one that I always fly today, could I use ILS? Yes. If I were the same aircraft with the same capability, and last summer I was flying the alternate flight path, was I not able to have that capability? Is that why we're talking about this? Because I
Yes.
gave that up?
Yes.
That's the question I'm trying to ask you.
Your question is no. The quiet visual approach did not have a localizer flight path.
All right, but if you can design an ILS to come in straight over the hospital, why can't you design one that avoids the hospital and avoids the dangerous and populated areas? Why can't you design one to come down Route 17 and cut over below Hackensack? It just seems to me you have fantastic abilities. You can be precise, you can be accurate. Why can't you just move the flight path, which would be controlled by this ILS? I mean, what is the big deal about shifting the standard flight path?
Well, there is certain parameters that the ILS has to for a pilot, and I don't want to get into explaining that because it'll take all night.
Well, but you're not answering our questions. You're telling us when we have a question, the answer's too complex, so you just have to trust us.
No, I'm up here to explain the ILS system.
And I'm saying
you're asking me to.
The ILS
explain
system seems brilliant. I'm happy you have it.
Okay.
I don't understand why the ILS system cannot be used on an approach down Route 17 that eliminates going over all of our homes, risks hitting the hospital. It just doesn't seem logical. If you can design one flight path, why can't you design another flight path? Can somebody answer why another flight path can't be designed?
Well, let me just say this: we're not the experts, the TERPs, the experts that design approaches. However, you have a great question. What I tried to explain before, there are limitations, parameters of each different type of instrument or navigational approach, and I cannot, and we cannot, answer the specifics as to why or how that can or cannot be done. But as a promise, as a promise to the TANAAC and everybody here, I will attempt to have a TERPS expert, an approach, someone who designs approaches and departure procedures to be at another meeting.
If there are real safety issues, if there are real dangers to modifying the flight path, we can kind of understand that. But nobody is giving us a good reason why it cannot be done. And
Well, one thing to understand is this procedure, the ILS, is a straight-in approach. When you start to bring it over 17, it's offset. Now you have to take that into it as well, because now you're almost destabilizing it.
So swing the stuff to an angle from northern Bergen County and bring it in straight that way.
Okay.
I mean,
let me try to. It is a lot more.
They've done this for, they do this for noise abatement in.
All right, we're at our 3 minutes. We have a lot of people who want to speak. Thank you, Mr. Eisen.
The one thing I would like to address in reference to the gentleman's question is it as Michael showed, every little change, and this is really what I wanted him to demonstrate through his presentation, has an impact to all of the abutting airspace that you saw. So moving an approach path is not as simple as drawing a line on a piece of paper. Again, my promise to you is I will have a TERPS expert at one of the meetings to try to answer your questions more effectively and expertly than we can, because we are not the ones that design the approaches. I appreciate it. Okay? Thank you. Yes.
Next, please.
Hi, good evening. I have 2 points. This might refer to the prior person's comment. There are 2 incoming flight paths. One is a visual approach over Route 17, and one is an instrumental approach over the apartment buildings in Prospect. Why can't the instruments maybe only have money for one instrumental path? Why can't the instruments from that path be switched over to the other path? There already are 2 paths. Obviously, the pilots like to take the instrumental path over Prospect. They don't like to take the visual path that exists over the highway. Put the instruments over the highway. There's a straight line between 2 points, and it can be done. I don't think that this is as difficult as flying to Mars or the moon. My second point is, when I can look up from my backyard, which is adjacent to the hospital, I can read the numbers on the engines. It's not 1,000 feet up. It doesn't even seem like it's 500 feet up. It's very close. I called up your offices one day and was talking to, I believe his name was Michael, whatever his name was. And I was talking on the phone and I said, this is ridiculous. Every 5 minutes, if I'm in the backyard, it's almost, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, especially on the Sundays that you want to relax. It's frequent because there's almost 500 incoming flights, 500 outgoing flights, so it's not like once an hour. I was on the phone with him inside, and he heard the flight. I didn't even say anything. I said, I'm talking. He says, "Oh, I hear the airplane." It's very low and very loud. Whoever's saying it's 300 feet above the hospital, it comes where my building is 12 stories. The hospital is 6 stories. We're adjacent to each other. It's very close to this building, which is adjacent to the hospital. I think that people aren't following the rules. Additionally, there's not supposed to be that many flights after midnight. They could come in at 2:45, 2:48, 2:52 a.m. I've literally been woken up by them. And that's the story. So
I'll try to address it. Again, I think your first question is applicable to the other gentleman's question. Again, we'll try to research that for you. It's not a simple project. I'll definitely tell you that, but we'll get an expert to probably give you a lot better answer than I can for the evening. In respect to the altitude that you observe and the nighttime operations, we do not have FAA air traffic. We do not at Teterboro regulate the number of aircraft that come into the airport. However, the airport has a very strong noise abatement policy that discourages flights after 11 o'clock. Is it 11 or 12? If you look at the raw statistics that the airport can provide, they will show you that the air traffic for Teterboro Airport has decreased tremendously. As I told you before, I have 17 years at Teterboro as a controller, a frontline manager, and eventually the air traffic manager. And I worked in the tower, and I know how many flights used to be between midnight because I worked those shifts. But right now at Teterboro, the flights today are, I would say, 25% of what they were 10 years ago. I'm sure if you pursued that question for an exact amount, TANAAC would research that for you and get you the answer. And he made a third point I kind of lost track of. Oh, in reference to the descent. The descent angle is predetermined if an aircraft is flying an ILS approach and the aircraft is on the correct glide path, which he should be, because the aircraft is actually being directed by the instruments in the aircraft. Is a very precise approach that doesn't vary from the prescribed altitude requirement. However, you can see other aircraft that fly at different flight rules, VFR flight rules, that do not have a precision approach guidance like the ILS for runway 19er. They usually navigate by a different altitude system, which is called a PAPI, which provides them general altitude guidance. So you could see aircraft that vary in altitude, for sure.
So at another meeting, we were told that it had to clear 300 feet above the hospital. It seems like it's closer because if I can read the letters on the engines, I don't think I can read, can you read 200, 400 feet up? I mean, you could really read them.
I live under the departure path for Newark, so I see a lot of things too. But yeah, I can understand what you're saying, and the perception can be accurate, and it might not be accurate.
I have 4 people in my family who have pilot's license, so we talked a little bit about this. I think we all appreciate the generalities, but we really do want specifics. If it's 300 feet, if there's 400 flights coming in and 400 flights coming out, 25% you never know. But I mean, are there 450 flights coming in every day?
It varies every day, difference,
Well,
but
the average.
450 flights is not a bad average to use.
So how much is that? How many per hour without it being after 11 o'clock at night?
I don't track it from an air traffic
I'm just saying,
perspective.
'cause
It is tracked by the airport, so directed through TANAAC, I'm sure we can get you those figures.
Like I said earlier, about 5% of our operations are nighttime operations that occur between the hours of, I think it's 10 p.m. and 6 a.m.
And
I'm sorry, 11 p.m. and 6 a.m.
Okay, so 10%, 5%?
About 5%,
And there's about
yes.
500 flights a day? coming
We
in
average,
And
yeah.
going out, 1,000 flights?
No, it's not 1,000
Okay,
flights.
1,000?
No, we
No.
we
So
average 500 flights a day. That's arrivals
In
and
and out, okay.
departures, yes.
So 25 flights in late at night, 5%?
During the course of the evening?
On average, I mean, we're just giving you average numbers. When we, we can give you more specifics when we report this information at the TANAAC meetings. The last quarterly report we gave, it was about 5% of the operations were nighttime operations.
5% of 500 average, so 25 a night. That's a little, that's a little bit more we can grasp that.
If you use those general figures, you're
Right.
accurate, it's mathematical,
Right.
but it's not every day that you have 500
Right,
flights. There are
that's only on
days
average.
Yeah, there are days we have 200 flights. So, and that's both arrivals and departures. So, mathematically, if you use that, you could say 25 flights if it was 500 operations on that day. Then we also have to look at how many arrivals as compared to departures. So to give you an exact figure, a daily figure, it can be done.
I wasn't looking for an exact.
Yeah.
Just,
If
a
you
number,
said, you
rather
see
than a
20,
percentage.
25 flights for Teterboro on average, not including the weekends, because our weekend traffic is much, much lower. And I don't think that would be a bad average to use.
Thank you.
Okay?
Next, please.
Aha. I know.
But I agree with her. Everything she said happened by us. What I wanted
There's the mic, Mayor.
Sorry. Yeah, I know, I'm sorry.
I'm on
I just
that.
said whatever she said, I agreed with. But what I wanted to say is, whenever people talk about, well, I'm not sure, we'll have to see, you're not getting a definitive answer, I always find that there's a money issue behind it. So I'm just curious to know, coming from, you guys, trying to figure out the situation, I feel that there's a money issue behind it, and that, you're stopping the procedure due to finances, due to money. I don't know if, because the planes have to go around 17, is it the pilots paying more in gas, in diesel fuel and whatever they use? I mean, and I know, since they're your clients, you want to keep them happy. But I smell a money problem here, but I can't say how. I can't say how. And I just wanted to know from Mayor LaBrosse, and I'm not an expert, I don't know, this is all on the top of my head. Can you charge for airspace?
Not to the FAA.
Oh, well, okay. No, you can't. No. It's New York, they do. I was just wondering if we could charge here.
For real estate, you can.
To the medical center, we do.
And the medical
Real
center,
estate,
you
real
can?
estate you can, but
You
not the
can,
airspace for
okay.
flights.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Regina DePasqua again. I have a question. You had Googled where the hospital is. 2 miles, that's right.
Just a rough
Yeah, I'm around the corner from it. It's about right. I'll take your word for it on the degree on the slope, but the altitude. Sea level? Do you know how high the hill is where the hospital is above sea level? And do you know how high the hospital and the buildings are above that? Well,
Each building will be evaluated when, every time it goes up, if it's within every time a building goes up, it's evaluated through a process called OEAAA. And they look at heights, impacts, like tech ops will look at, hey, will this impact the procedure? So it's all evaluated through a group of people.
But when you're saying 600 feet there, is that from sea level or above the roof of the hospital?
It's
It's 100 feet at least above
where
sea
you're
level
going
there.
to answer your question, it doesn't mean it's 600 feet over the hospital. It means it's 600 feet AGL, above ground level. And of course, if the building is 200 feet high,
That makes it 400.
it makes it a 400-foot separation.
So it does take into account that where that is over 100 feet higher than where Route 17 is? which is what makes it more logical to go down Route 17 also because of it's at least 100 feet above sea level on the top of that hill.
Okay. I'm going to draw some of these comparisons between the ILS and the charted visual when I do the presentation in
Okay.
just a minute.
All right.
So hopefully I'll answer your question.
Because I know it's not 600
All right.
feet above the hospital. I know.
No, and I don't think we've indicated that, but, aircraft do, when they're not on an ILS approach, they can vary that altitude also. Of course, we don't want to see aircraft too close to any building, and they're regulated if they're on an instrument approach. A visual approach, not so much. Okay?
Okay.
But they still do follow, like you said, the PAPI, which gives that 3-degree glide slope as well.
Taking your word for it on that.
Okay.
But you saw the pictures.
We see the pictures.
Yeah, we saw it.
Okay.
Some of them were from my front yard. Okay.
Next, please.
Hi, I'm Mr. Incalcaterra, and I live in the First Ward. I have a question about the ILS taking off. They take off with an ILS?
No.
No, only coming in.
Only arriving.
My next question is, what happens to these pilots who, this is a volunteer nighttime curfew, or I shouldn't use the word curfew. After 11 o'clock, they're not supposed to, but that's all volunteer. Am I correct in that?
We ask that they.
Okay, you asked that, okay, there is no regulation, no federal regulations
No, sir.
because,
As a matter of fact,
yes.
the federal regulation precludes us
Right.
because we are an airport that accepts federal funds.
Federal funds.
We're a public airport.
Okay.
We really cannot tell people not to fly into our.
Okay, so they can come and go as they please, okay, but based on their volunteer workings or their ways, right?
That is,
Okay.
yes, that
That's
is
okay.
correct.
That's in simple terms.
Let me just say to you, sir, that, we are one of very few airports in the country that.
Speak to the mic.
Sorry. We're one of very few airports in the country that are allowed to impose any rules that has restrictions on who operates at our airport. But because we are a public airport, we accept federal funding. There are limitations as to what we can and cannot control as far as air traffic at our airport.
And who says we accept them or not accept them? Is it the Port Authority that says, okay, you're accepting the money that comes in?
So in order for us to be able to do the work that we do on the airport to ensure safe facilities, for operations at the airport, we do accept federal funding. Yes, we do.
Okay. Now, my next question is, what happens to those pilots or those planes who violate or go over that? Are they fined? I mean, we have people here who don't sleep at night because some of those planes come in and make tons of noise. Am I correct?
So
They wake you up in the middle of the night. Are they punished anyway? Or they say, hey, wait a minute, you guys coming in making a lot of noise and disturbing the residents who here? Do they get fined?
So
Excuse me.
okay.
The curfew is a volunteer curfew.
Okay.
You can't, and first of all, it's an agreement. It's not regulated. The airport is chartered to operate 12 hours, 24 hours a day. It's open 24 hours a day. People can volunteer, businesses that want to come in and out can volunteer to make it their habit to not come in at night. But those people that wish to have the perfect legal right. They can't be punished.
Okay,
for it.
so in other words, they can do what they want. I know I heard the clock. They can do what
have
they
the
want in
freedom
the
to
middle of the
fly.
night, wake up everybody, and there's no consequence.
Of course, no, it's volunteer. It's not something you can listen, we would love that in our town. And what I'm trying to make you understand is that we cannot impose those restrictions. The Port Authority cannot impose those restrictions upon, because the charter says you can operate this airport, you have to operate it at 24 hours a day.
And that's the price of freedom and money.
That's Correct, and that, I can talk to you for 2 hours, and I'll only
Right.
talk to you about 5 minutes later on.
Thank you.
With that.
Next
Gonna
presentation.
move on to the
Ready?
next subject, okay?
Actually, I want to say one thing before we move on. It is a public airport, correct?
Correct.
And you take federal money,
Yes,
correct? And
sir.
the federal money's paid with what? Taxpayer money?
Yes, sir.
That's the public,
Yes, we understand that.
okay? And that's why we're here. Yeah, the public's the one being affected by a public rule. So, I mean, that's where another thing we need to get to is how do we change that? It makes absolutely no sense that 3 people on a jet that holds 30 people can override people sleeping. Next, please.
And that's a little out of my purview, just in case you're wondering. Again, thank you, everybody, for coming this evening. You know, I want everybody here to realize that we in air traffic control, the FAA, are here and are an active participant in receiving your issues and complaints. We in air traffic can't resolve everything, but I want everybody to clearly understand that we're not here to battle you on anything. We're here to try to find a resolution for you. And it is not often a case that can be resolved in a matter of a week, a day, or a month. And moving on from that, we'll go to the quiet visual, which took a few years to get accomplished. But it actually began in 2007. The TANAAC group had basically identified the issue with the close proximity of the approaches to the runway 19er at Teterboro, to the Hackensack Medical Center complex, and the surrounding community. Of course, noise in itself was a subject of concern also. In light of that, and in support of TANAAC, Senators Lautenberg, Menendez, and Congressman Rothman signed a letter which petitioned or requested the FAA take a look at this situation and asked the Port Authority and the FAA to consider or try to move or resolve the issue. Next slide, please. The work actually began in 2008. Between 2008 and 2011, we did have several designs that were submitted. Each one of those ran into problems, whether it was an obstruction problem, a technical problem, a regulatory problem. They weren't acceptable. They weren't flyable. So they never came to pass. Then in 2011, there was a member actually from the flying community, a very proficient jet pilot, and he proposed a general approach that was eventually designed into the charted quiet visual, which was pushed ahead. So I think I got ahead of my presentation there, but let's go to the next slide there. So it took until 2015 to actually get an acceptable design, an acceptable, safe design submitted. And from there, it went to another review, which requires it to be flight checked and passing all the tests to show that this flight path is safe. So it was, and it did, pass the final tests in 2015. And in February 2016, it passed the flight checks. And in fact, I believe we had 4 flight checks on this particular approach. And at that time, the FAA decided that we'd like to test this procedure. So that test began on April 4th of 2016 and ran for a 6-month period.
4 days.
I beg your pardon?
Didn't go for 4 days, from June 22nd to June 27th?
No, the test ran a continuous 6 months. Let me show you what happens here. You don't implement, I see the gentleman shaking his head, but we don't implement approach and turn it on and off. Once it's turned on, it's on. It's available. It's there, okay? It isn't something that we say, oh, okay, we'll publish it today and we remove it tomorrow, because the cycle doesn't work that way for us, okay? This right here, this particular plate actually shows the flight paths to runway 19 at Teterboro. As you can see, the flight paths go from the western quadrant to the northwest quadrant to the northern quadrant. I wish I had a laser pointer, but I don't this evening. But these are the actual approach paths for runway 19 at Teterboro. If you look underneath the green highlighted approach paths, you'll see another blue line there. And that blue line there represents the charted visual approach for runway 19. As you can see, it actually falls underneath pretty much about 85% of the flight tracks going into Teterboro. We have the next slide, please. As you were briefed a little bit earlier, this is the ILS approach. This is the approach that the approach plate, excuse me, that the pilots refer to fly that particular approach. Next one. This is the charted visual approach. And as you can see, highlighted, as everybody knows, it actually follows Route 17 all the way to the approach end of runway 19. There are weather minimums. This approach cannot be flown unless there is a ceiling at or above 3,500 feet, and the visibility has to be 5 miles or more. You move on to the next one. This one here is just a clear picture of the charted quiet visual for runway 19. As you can see, the design, or the intent of the design, was to follow Route 17 as closely as possible to the approach end of runway 19. In this particular slide, we're showing the deviation between the two approach paths. In green, you see the, highlighted in green, you see the approach paths indicating the ILS for runway 19, and the blue line was the proposed approach path for the charted visual for runway 19. Circled in red is the Hackensack Medical Center. This is basically the data. The next slides I'll show you is the data that we accumulated over the 6-month period. And so I won't get into all the statistics on it, but each and every one. But identified in red is the approach path utilizing the ILS to runway 19. Identified in light blue or green. I think my color spectrum's off there a little bit. But it indicates the approach path for the charted quiet visual. On this particular date, this is April 19th, we had 1 aircraft. So this line indicates 1 aircraft flying the charted visual approach on that day. You have the next slide, please. In 615, we have our higher usage here, slightly higher usage, 1 aircraft, higher usage on the ILS. And in this particular plate, actually, aircraft are flying a combination of different approaches. You have the ILS to runway 19, and the red lines that you see curved to the east are actually circling to land runway 24. There was only 1 approach flown this day by a pilot. Next slide. This particular day, we had 27 aircraft fly the approach. Next one. 7 aircraft flew the approach. And on this one, we had 57. One of the things I want to indicate to everybody, because there's been questions about why the decision was made to discontinue. If you look at that segment, the last segment closest to the airport, closest to the runway, here, this section down, you can see both the ILS for runway 19 and the approach path for the charted quiet visual approach. Keeping in mind that we had anticipated or hoped that these flights would be more to the west, like I showed you on that single blue line. But as you can see, that was not accomplished. It wasn't fully successful. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Again, we have 74 aircraft flying the approach on this day. And again, you can identify the close proximity to the Hackensack Medical Center and surrounding area by the aircraft that were flying the charted quiet visual. And I think we got just a couple more slides. that show the same thing. 626, so we had 20 aircraft on this day. Next slide. 44 on the 7th of August. 1 again, and this is the total for the 6-month period, was 234 aircraft. Again, I'd like everybody to kind of identify with the objective of the approach and what was actually accomplished. It wasn't, in my mind, fully successful. So let's move on to that. That is correct. I'll answer the question, so if you can hold them for a couple more minutes, just let me summarize here. So originally, the FAA published the procedure in charts with waypoints that were depicted for visual reference. In other words, the pilot could use a combination of a nav aid and a visual reference. But the approach was designed to be a visual approach with just navigational assistance. And I'll take it back a couple slides to maybe explain that a little bit better. Eventually, the publication company that publishes these approaches had brought out an issue with the navigational aids being published on a charted visual approach. So they actually pulled those navigational points off of the approach. At that point in time, the pilots could no longer press a button, per se. Like press a button and it was pre-programmed into the aircraft, what they call the flight management system, all right? Which now required the pilot to manually put all these numbers into the flight management system one at a time while he was flying or she was flying. Part of that problem when that happens is that the pilot's concentration is supposed to be on the visual reference points out the window. He's supposed to be looking for traffic. He's supposed to be looking for the aircraft he's following. He's supposed to be looking, is supposed to be looking at whatever obstructions are out there. So if the pilot is involved trying to press a bunch of numbers and numerous sets of numbers, this is not like pressing 1, 2, 3. This is like a series of 6 numbers, and there are several of those sets of numbers. It became a safety concern to the flying community also. Let's see, we can move on to the last slide again, see if we can touch back with that. And this basically says everything I just said. The total, the outcome of the test period at that time did not give us the results that we were hoping for, plain and simple. And the lack of use. Someone asked about the pilot can fly it if he wants to or not, and that's very true. Pilot doesn't have to accept this type of approach or any approach. He can accept the approach or he can say, I want a different approach. That's his choosing. At that point in time, the 6-month period, the data showed us, number one, it wasn't successful fully, and there was pushback from the flying community as it being overburdening type of approach to put into their aircraft. At that point in time, it was decided that, well, this procedure is no longer functional or not worth pursuing in this capacity at this time. And that's when the decision was made to discontinue the approach completely. You got any other thing? The one thing I wanted to step back a little bit is, can you go to the approach plates that showed? No, all the way back to the ILS approach.
You're the deputy.
Okay. The difference on the next approach, next one, please. This one right here. You can see the navigational points are indicated by name in this particular approach. Plus, there are the charted visual fixes that the aircraft, the pilot is looking for. That's what he's supposed to be utilizing besides the highway to fly this approach. all right? That's the difference between these two approaches. I think we can take some questions at
All
this
right,
point.
the Deputy Mayor has a question first.
I
Sorry,
go
Larry.
first, and
Ladies
then
first.
we'll let the rest of you go up.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay, so pretty much in a nutshell, when we look at this, 450 flights a day coming in and out of Teterboro Airport, and we're making a decision like this based on 230 flights over 6 months, which I don't believe, quite honestly, was a fair assessment of this alternate flight path, number one, numerically. When you look at the approach and you're looking at flights funneling in on your red line, which is your guided approach because it was charted well, of course, that's going to be a very tight landing for many, many reasons, if none other than the fact that this is most familiar to the folks that are flying that, because they've been flying it that way for a very long time. I think that with additional flight testing and discovery and better charting and mapping, it would also tighten up as it approached the airport. And on those few random ones where maybe it was closer to the hospital, there were still many of those 234 that avoided the hospital, and that is our intent. But bottom line is, you had pilots that contributed to developing this course. So they're the ones that made this recommendation, and those are the folks that fly the aircraft. Agree that they don't want to have to always be entering waypoints in as they're flying. Do they not have the capability at the beginning of their flight of entering all the waypoints for that flight? Must they enter only one at a time?
I can't answer it because I don't truly know, but maybe there's
I
a
mean,
pilot in here that could
I don't know your
answer that.
FMS system, but my experience in my lifetime with FMS systems enable you to enter multiple waypoints before you begin your flight path and capture that path and not have to do it while you are flying. I don't know what FMS system you have.
I would say that, first of all, not every aircraft has that
Absolutely.
capability. Secondly, there's a limitation to the flight systems. They can only, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but from my knowledge is, there's certain limitation in certain amount of waypoints that you can enter into the flight management system.
I'm sure that that's true, but we're talking about a relatively short period of space, a relatively short distance that you're traveling from the normal path to take this secondary path. And you don't have to answer my question, but my final remark is, it sounds to me like we could solve this entire problem if we charted this path correctly. So that then, this path, by investing some time and money, doing some flight tests, which is what I believe this trial was supposed to be about, collecting data. It's not going to be perfect. We understand it's not going to be perfect right away. This is, to me, it's like a flight. This is a flight test. This is what's happening. You made it optional. We're collecting data. You have pilots that are interested. You have a community that is very, very engaged. So let's continue this. Let's do this for another 6 months. Let's do this seriously. Let's collect the data. Let's get the path charted so that it can be captured into the FMS system and give it a fair shot before we discontinue it. That's what we're asking of you today. I believe most of the people that are speaking here are going to agree to that. And if not, if you're telling us that from a scientific basis, this is totally unacceptable, that you can't do it, we need another solution. And we're not here to solve your problem. We're here for you to understand our problem. But from what I understand and what I see here, and again, I've been retired for 10 years now, so I know things have changed, but my background's aerospace engineering. I designed and developed FMS systems. That's what I did. All right?
So am I correct?
I designed and developed autopilots. That's what I did. So I understand how this stuff works. And, you know, I don't want to say this, it's not nice, but we frequently like to say a lot of things and like to scare a lot of people that don't understand. And that upsets me to no end, because our role as public servants is to take the complex and make it simple and let folks understand, because they have a real problem. We have a real problem. So let's simplify this, let's not complicate it, and let's see if we can work together to get this back and running and give it another fair shot.
I am an engineer by training. I personally could not have designed an experiment as guaranteed to fail as the one you designed. If I were a pilot and I had the option of going through all the machinations that one has to on your experiment with the western route, I wouldn't do it. Why would anybody do it? You just go the other way. If you would have shifted, what is it called, the ILS? If you had shifted the ILS over and tested it that way, you might have had a fair experiment. But you designed an experiment guaranteed to fail. And frankly, you have done a disservice to this community by doing that. It was not in any way a fair comparison, and your data is meaningless.
Two questions. The first, did you mention that there was a third party that was supposed to do coding of waypoints and that company pulled something out?
Correct.
Now, isn't that the reason the test failed? Because then the pilots had to do things manually during that period and they didn't want to do it?
It's part of the reason, yes.
So isn't the whole problem getting that company to code the waypoints and do another test that's going to make this successful? It's all, you know, without these automated coded waypoints, there was no way for this to be successful. So what do we need to do to get that company to do the coding right?
Again, I will present that same answer that I presented earlier that both you gentlemen brought up. We are not the experts on the design. I will attempt, or I will get somebody here that can answer the design issues for you.
That third party, why?
It's a regular, it turned out to be a regulatory issue. They could not publish navigational aids for a visual approach. So they ended up pulling those navigational fixes.
I think we deserve a better answer because the whole thing failed on that point. And that answer does not
It is not the only reason. You had, I believe I pointed out 3 specific reasons. But again, let me get an expert in here to answer the questions about design.
Okay, so can you simply for us just say, why do you think this failed? Okay, you said that it was not successful. Why did this fail? So we all understand why it failed.
I think I answered the question. I think I answered it.
Repeat it.
Well, I thought I was very clear. There's lack of use, lack of participation by the flying community. It wasn't 100% successful in moving.
It failed is what you're saying.
You asked me for you asked me for the reasons, and I gave you the reasons.
Please, please, please. Sir, if you want to speak, get in line and come up. Thank you.
Okay. Lifelong resident of Hackensack. I've been dealing with this all my life. Last 30 years on Colonial Terrace. And no matter whether my windows are down, I'm in the house, or with my backyard on the deck, you know, the noise is just, it's too much. It's too much for, you know, this community to bear that burden. We need to spread it. It's not a thing that, okay, we don't want in our neighborhood, but we just need to spread that noise. Also, I'm not an engineer, but I'm a CPA, so I do sample data, and definitely the testing that you guys did is definitely inefficient. And to just abandon us in this community without really coming here with another alternative is just definitely not acceptable, you know, to us. So we need an alternative.
Okay.
For this.
As I expressed earlier, I've participated with TANAAC. Mayor Dressel could say I've been at probably every single meeting for the last 10 years. I'll continue as an FAA representative to participate in that. That's what we're here for tonight, and continue to participate and open to your comments, your suggestions, your input. Years ago, you didn't see that from any government agency. But Today, there is actually, it's mandated that we get together with the community, discuss the issues, discuss the problems. Hopefully, somewheres down the road, we find a resolution. So we'll continue to do that.
Right, but, you know, and we just need more than just being open to our comments. You know, we need action. We need a plan to alleviate this noise over our community.
We'll keep endeavoring.
Thanks.
Keep going.
Frank Delaney, 444 Heath Place in Hackensack. I was up here with my neighbors expressing the same thing. In my neighborhood, you cannot hear yourself talk on a Saturday or Sunday. But my main issue is, I was just watching, I'm not know anything about aeronautics or anything, but I was just watching the map you put up. And the blue line that you showed, it's obvious it's much further route. Into Teterboro, it's much further than the other approaches. So that would make it a money-making issue. That's why only 57 pilots flew out, because they were going to lose money. They're not concerned about the safety of this town. They're concerned about the money in their pockets. And it's obvious just looking at that map.
I can't controvert your statement, but the routes are there and the pilots fly the route.
How you doing? Thank you. First, I'd like to thank you for being here. You know, it was tough getting you guys down here. I just would like to know from you, have you discussed the sheer number of people that this route affects? Do you understand, and I'm not sure if you do, what type of populace center that route goes over? You know, you can talk about the close to 10,000 people on Prospect Avenue. You can talk about the hospital and the fact that the planes get so close to the hospital. God forbid there's an incident. That flies over our high school, our kids, our future. God forbid there is an incident. Instead of having the planes, you guys are an intelligent group of people. And I'm sure you can find a solution. But you're flying these planes over our high school and putting our kids in jeopardy. So what I would ask that you do today, are you going to look into, if this is a failure, if that's true, are you going to look into another flight pattern?
We continue to approach the question every single meeting.
What's the next step for you as an agency?
I don't know what the next step will be at this point in time. I don't know what we can do with what we have. I don't know what all the limitations are. Personally, my authority and expertise, I don't know all of the variables, but we have continued to explore this.
So who does
Well, it's a culmination of several different parts of the agency. Everyone that designs the approach, that flight checks the approach. It's not just one person.
Okay.
It is several different branches within the agency.
So would you agree to allow or set up or be the liaison for our deputy mayor, who obviously knows what she's talking about here, and our mayor, to sit down with who the decision makers are and explain to them how important this is to our community?
I am.
And who is that, and when is that going to be?
I've participated through TANAAC, and that is your representative.
You just told me that you're not the decision maker. You are not the person that's going to be able to give us an answer. That's what you just said. That's what just came out of your mouth. So what I'd like to know is when our representatives can sit down with the people who are the decision makers, who can give us an answer.
Well, I understood your question to mean, will I continue
I'm sorry. I didn't
to sit down with the deputy mayor? And my answer was absolutely, yes, I'll continue to do that. What is presented to me, I will pursue. Where that pursuit leads me in reference to the proposal may be a different direction than another proposal. So you have my promise and my commitment to continue to work with TANAAC, the mayor, the deputy mayor, and everybody on the TANAAC committee to bring whatever questions, problems, issues you have and direct them to the proper agency in the FAA, the proper branch.
Mr. Mayor, can I have one more, please?
Go ahead.
Just the last question. If you're telling us right now that you're going to bring it to the next level, I would like to know, are you going to set the next level up to have conversations with our elected officials to get this fixed? because you just told us you can't make the decisions. And, you know, there's obviously a level of miscommunication here. Because we've, you know, the people have been out here multiple times. They've spoken multiple times about, you know, the noise and that, and the danger that this thoroughway is going to do to the city.
We will move it out to the right direction, that's all.
Excuse me, please, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Don't shoot the messenger, please. He's a working guy just like you and me.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not shooting the messenger. I'm
Okay,
absolutely
please.
not doing that.
And
I'm
that's-
asking him if he can take it to the next level.
Please.
Yeah, with all due respect, you're in our home.
I'm in your home.
Yeah, absolutely. This is our home, and we're asking them specifically if they can take it to the next level. That's the only question that I've asked him, and I'm waiting for a response. Sir.
I believe I answered
Gary-
but I will bring it to the next level.
It was through TANAAC, through this same committee that Gary is referring to, that this approach, this issue was brought forward, and that it was pushed and pushed and pushed over a number of years till it got to the right people to try to develop a solution to the issue. It's not an easy issue to resolve. Many people worked many years to at least get to this stage. And it is the commitment of that committee with membership from your town, right, to continue to bring these issues to the committee. And we may not have come up with the solution now, but it certainly demonstrates the committee's commitment to try to push an issue along until there can be a resolution. So, as a co-chair of TANAAC, working with Mayor Dressel, working with Gary, we have at least gotten the attention of people who can help in trying to come up with a solution to this issue, and we will continue to work on the issues, not just for Hackensack, but for all of the communities around the airport that are affected by the operations. And that is our mission as a committee.
And I'm sure everyone in this room applauds what TANAAC does, and that's not what we're here to question, and that's not what I'm questioning. And if I've offended you, Mr. Mayor, I
You didn't
apologize.
offend me. You didn't offend me, sir.
Okay.
I'm
But
above being
simply,
offended.
there was no
Because
answer
I'm you.
to this question. Yeah.
As I said, I'm you. I suffer from the same things you suffer.
Okay.
My community does, and that's why I'm here, and that's why I stayed with this committee for 30 years, to see that things like this were done. You're here, I'm in your home now, because the FAA said they wanted to be here. I would just as soon have the meeting in my town, if I was going to have it. But we are here, TANAAC is here, because the FAA said we will have the meeting in Hackensack, but it'll be a TANAAC meeting.
And we thank them for that. I just want to.
Gary, for one, is working here at the direction of his superiors. He has superiors. And those people are represented here in this office. And they will, I'm sure, get the message now, your competent mayor and deputy mayor, that they want more answers.
So all I'm asking, sir, is, and I applaud everything you're saying, but what I'm asking is that he specifically can speak to his supervisor and try and get a meeting with our mayor and deputy mayor. That's all I'm asking. So thank you, sir, for allowing me.
Yeah, I believe I committed to that.
Move on.
So, yeah.
Jerry Weber, I live on Prospect Avenue. It sounds to me like somehow a test was designed which wasn't really successful, and it was really so designed that it wouldn't be successful. That's the way you sound to me. My concern is that, unlike some of the other voices you've heard, people are asking for another test. I think based on the fact that there are about 72 high-rise buildings, multi-story buildings, 5 schools, the Hackensack University Medical Center, I think on the face of it, we should have another flight path. I think it's perverse to continue this as just an accident waiting to happen. So I can't see the need for another flight test. I would say just look at the situation. Look at the areas where you're flying over and just make a decision to take it somewhere else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. the pilots prefer to fly over an instrument path. And this other path over Route 17 is visual. And the pilots rely on data points. Every month, a flight path manual is produced. There wasn't one month where the correct data points were available for the pilots. They couldn't do this test. And now you're saying it was for 6 months. There was a report that flights were done in the 3rd week of June, and one flight prior to that. And it was supposed to start on April 4th. It didn't start on April 4th, even though the paper said it would. So between April 4th and the 3rd week of June, there was one test went through. There was no data points in April, May, June, no data points in this monthly manual. The pilots weren't going to do it. That's not a test.
I think you're saying the data points are...
There's a monthly flight manual that's produced, and
Actually,
there was an error.
Actually, it's every 56 days,
Okay,
but
there was an error.
there
There was never the correct information.
There was not an error in the waypoints. There was an error in the radial that was an outbound
There was
radial.
an error. They couldn't rely on the information. They never had the information they needed.
No,
So-
it actually didn't impact the approach. So that was just a fat finger mistake. But it didn't impact the nav aids that were used and the visual reference points that were used.
That the pilots would use, but they had to calculate it themselves instead of it being provided to them. There were not enough information provided to them on any of these books. And they had to, as you say, go and figure out numbers. They weren't going to do it. They were told they were going to be given with this regular manual the data they needed. They never were given the complete data, so they didn't fly. And from what information I have, the flight was one flight between April 4th and the end of June. And there was really the 3rd week in June where there were a few flights. And then it was abandoned. I don't want to call anybody. I never got the number that you said. But this was an experiment that was a failure. It wasn't a failure for the visual flight path, but they weren't given the equipment they needed. They weren't given the information. So
Well, the information, there was one correction, actually 2 corrections that were made to the original approach plate. That was renumbering the radial, that didn't impact the approach itself. It was just numbered incorrectly. And the second change was actually highlighting or putting better drawing on the map of the visual approach points. The visual approach points were always there, but we decided that let's make them a little bit bigger and a little bit better for a pilot to recognize. And that's what we did.
And it
But
wasn't-
all of the other information remained the same.
We're at 3 minutes. We still have a few people left. Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening, Kathleen Saville. I'm falling asleep. I never heard so much double talk in one room in all my life. If the Wright brothers did this experiment, we wouldn't even be flying today. You failed because of one variable, and then you abandoned the mission. I mean, if you see something's not working, you go back to the drawing board and you find the reason. So, are you from PSC&G? Or are you from the flight people? You're giving us all you can't give us the answer because you're not the right person to. You knew specifically why you came here. You came here because we wanted to see why this flight can't go over Route 17 as opposed to where it's going now. That's what you came here for. You should have answers for this, not because you can't answer it because technically you're not the right person. So why didn't they send us the right person? And sir, in due respect, if we've been working on this for 5 years and it doesn't work, then we're hearing things from the audience, from the people that are here, that you didn't do it right or you abandoned it or it wasn't tested enough. So go back to the drawing board, change your variables and make it work. We don't want excuses, we want results. I'm falling asleep. It's a whole bunch of double talking. You know why we're here. Thank you.
My name is Luis Garcia. I live in Prosper Avenue. I appreciate you being here with us tonight. Within the FAA set of priorities, how high or how low was the priority this situation has? It's a safety, it's a serious.
Safety is.
Yeah. Now, I'm not
That's
saying
what-
you, I'm saying within the FAA, how they prioritize safety issues. Or is it that they wait until something happens and then they react? Are they being proactive about it? I'm not saying you. I'm saying within the echelon of the FAA, how proactive are they in this particular issue?
Well, first I want to answer it that safety overrides everything in the FAA.
Well, I hope so.
That's the top utmost.
Yeah.
That is the upper limitation of everything. That is actually not the limitation. That's the basis
Yeah.
of everything. That's the basis. We don't want to look at throwing an experiment out there or a test that's going to be, number one, unsafe, and number two, doesn't deliver what we need it to deliver.
Okay, but then that visual approach was discontinued sometime in August, all right?
No.
Was
The
discontinued?
test ran until, I believe, October 4th.
Well, October.
Yeah, it was 6 months.
We are in the middle of June now. And still, no one is doing anything about it specifically. No one is designing a new approach. No one is working on that. I mean, you are just the in-between. You know, you come to here, you listen to us, you bring the concerns to the higher ups, and it's a back and forth, but nothing gets resolved. So I don't see
Well,
why.
we do want to eventually have a resolution.
Oh, of course.
And as I said before, and Mayor Dressel has said, this committee has been around for over 30 years. And, you know, well, I've attended.
Let him speak, please.
Okay, let me say this. I've attended every single meeting with probably the exception of 2, when my youngest one was born. And I can tell you the responses and the participation and the information that we get, we process. We're not ignoring anybody. I mean, you're all here tonight giving us new input. This is not something that materialized overnight. This is new input for us.
It's not new input, this is all old input. We've been doing it.
Right. From the podium only, please. Thank you. Sorry. Please, go ahead, sir.
The other thing that I notice is whatever approach you design cannot be imposed on a mandatory basis to the pilot. No? They can choose whatever they want. They can choose to continue with the ILS or whatever.
That's correct.
No, this is the one I just.
The approach they want to fly.
And,
Pilot in command makes the absolute choice.
Sir, your 3 minutes are up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you
Appreciate
for
it.
your answers.
Next, please.
Hi, I'm Paulette from Prospect. I delivered, I do some of your mailing. I just want to know if y'all did Plan A, like you said, I don't understand all this plane flight. Quiet visual means quiet to me, not noisy. So I just want to know what is Plan B, C, D? Because no matter what y'all designed to do, whether it was A, or B, if that failed or was designed to fail, whatever term you want to use, what is the next step? That's question one. Second, the people that's using these planes, commercial businessmen, do they know how the community feel as a whole? Not just talking to y'all. Y'all are the frontliners. We want to talk to the upper people, like piggybacking on one of the gentlemen said. We want to talk to the people that's using the plane, whether it's Robert De Niro, George Clooney. We want them to know how we feel as a community. Because sometimes these higher, upper management people, that they don't live in the community, but they don't know how the community feel and they don't live with us. They have kids. Some of them have feelings. Just because they got money don't mean common sense. So if they know how we feel as a whole, maybe one of them, whether it's Robert De Niro that used to live in Jersey, maybe coming back to Hackensack, as the rumor, whether he comes or not, he's not going to want to hear the noise either. So what are we as a community to get people to come and live in Hackensack where they won't say, oh, I might well be in the city. I'm leaving Hackensack or TANAAC or whatever because of the noise. So us as a whole, I don't care about titles. Titles don't mean nothing. When you take off the uniform, go home, you father, happy Father's Day to some of y'all. Some of you single mothers, happy Father's Day. So let's do, at least on Sunday, which is this Father's Day, stop the noise. At least on Sunday. That's what we can do as a whole. Take away the titles, okay? Have a nice day and thank y'all.
Hello again.
Hello.
I just want to explain in simple terms the perception from our point of view, because I also have been experiencing this. I know you've been doing it for 30 years, and I've been for 20 years listening, calling. 20 years ago, when I sat in my front yard with my young children, I held the phone up to one of the people the line that you call in, and the planes were coming in every 3 minutes. Now they're coming in every 60 seconds. So for us here as a community, we feel like it's getting worse. We feel like there's more happening. I think you're saying that there are fewer flights, but I don't feel that. I feel like there are more flights. And just to simplify, it sounds like we need to make it, or, I know it's their option, but the pilots, as this woman said, the pilots need to understand that there's a community below and there is a safety issue below. Our high school students are here. God forbid something should happen to have to make you change it. I think the best thing is to make you change it now. Express to these pilots that they must develop the habit of flying over 17. And if they have an emergency, isn't 17 a better route for them to land on if they have to? Didn't somebody land on Turnpike at one time? So I feel like it just makes so much more sense without going through all the mumbo jumbo of technology and all that. It just simply makes sense to us as human beings. So if we can communicate that to the pilots and to the people who you need to report to. And we appreciate you being here so that we can express this and hopefully achieve our goal.
No, thank you. I want everybody, again, to understand, we came here to give you the data, to try to educate, give you the information that you need, that we deal with. We can't make easy changes overnight or simple changes. There are no simple changes in this airspace. But we do, and we're receiving the information. And part of that information flows through these types of meetings. What the future will bring, don't have specifics on that right yet. But it doesn't mean that there isn't an ongoing search to make things better. And we'll continue on that.
We really, really want to count on you and count on you guys to just, let's get to a solution. I know it's not easy, but please, let's just get to a solution. Thank you.
Hi there. So maybe I'll turn around because I might be getting some darts. So I'm not Robert De Niro. I'm not John Travolta, but I am a pilot. I am a certified flight instructor. And I represent business aviation owners across the United States. And you're wondering if pilots are here and they're listening to your input. We are. Actually, I drove about 5 hours today to come to be here for the meeting. So I want to say thank you for all of the comments. I think they've been fantastic. I also live under the flight path or approach to my local airport. I'm a pilot. I don't mind the noise. I enjoy seeing aircraft over my house, but I'm a unique breed. And I recognize that. And I also recognize the increased volume in traffic and congestion over, one of the nation's busiest airspace areas. I want to say thank you to the FAA folks and Mayor and Deputy Mayor for all of your comments and input. I think it's tremendous that you guys have been here tonight trying to explain what we do and why we do it. And, you know, the word safety has come up over and over this evening. I can't tell you from a cockpit, the most paramount thing to me is safety. And it's not just my safety or the safety of the passengers behind me, whether it's 3 of them or it's 30 of them. It does not matter. Every life matters the same to me, just like yours does on the ground. So I do understand where you're coming from safety. There is nothing that we do when we get in the airplane that is not somehow tied to safety. And with regards to the visual approach, so we have a few of these across the country. I've flown a few. I did not have the opportunity to fly the quiet visual here, although I do understand the challenges from the cockpit side of the house with the procedure that was trialed for a number of months. I know from a pilot perspective, it's very difficult to, we call it fat finger in waypoints into an FMS while we're on a very critical phase of flight, which is a descent into the airport. So that does present challenges. There are also some towers to the west of Route 17 that also present a challenge when you enter into that final approach segment. So that can be, that presented some safety concerns to pilots. But, you know, all of those things, you're right. There are many solutions. I don't pretend to have the answer or the solution. I think from a pilot's perspective, we're always willing to come back to the table and look at any options that could, again, maintain safety for our passengers and our crew and folks on the ground. That is important to us. So I mostly just wanted folks to know we do hear what you're saying. I appreciate it, and I don't want you to think that pilots don't care. They absolutely do, just like the FAA does. Because we don't have solutions doesn't mean people don't care or safety isn't paramount. So.
Thank you. I didn't pay her for that either.
My name is Alan Vardy. I live on Prospect Avenue. I was looking at the map of Bergen County, and it's very obvious that we have 2 runways in Teterboro. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In your presentation, you constantly refer to runway number 19, which is directly in the flying path of airplanes approaching Teterboro, close to Route 17, intersecting Prospect Avenue. There's another runway, and that other runway actually would be serving airplanes coming from different directions as opposed to 19. Is that the reason that we don't use the other runway? I don't know what is the number of that other runway.
We actually, 24 is
24.
there's 2. Technically, there's 4 runways.
No, 4 runways.
2 southbound and 2 northbound.
Okay, so why we have all the traffic that comes into Teterboro, or most of the traffic coming into the runway, which is lined up straight in a straight line from Prospect Avenue?
Well, the ILS system is the system that is overlaying that area. Very simply,
But the
what that
ILS
was.
system, I think, when it was designed, could have been simply designed to serve 2 runways. One is 19 and the other one is 24. So why all the emphasis on 19 when we know for a fact that the flight path over into 19 will intersect Prospect Avenue with thousands of people living in there? Why don't we have some of the traffic coming into 24?
There is traffic arriving
But it's
runway
very minimal,
24,
sir.
but we do not have an
very
ILS for runway 24.
But the volume of the traffic going into 24 is perhaps 10% of what comes into 19. Is that correct?
It really depends on a lot of things. Weather,
No, but on
volume.
average, sir.
We utilize both runways consistently with each other. We usually arrive on runway 19 and depart runway 24. That's what our operation
From
is.
my window, I'm facing New York City, and I live on the 8th floor of a high-rise. I can see all the airplanes coming and going, okay, heading north, because I'm north of Teterboro. Very rarely I will see those airplanes that you're referring to in 24. I mean, I could collect statistics, which I really don't bother to do, but most of the flights happen on 19. So there has to be a reason for that. What is the...
Well, we have the ILS for 19. We cannot have, due to equipment limitations, have an ILS approach into runway 24.
But the equipment
Okay.
limitation, is that a financial limitation?
I don't know about the finances of
Well,
why they put
we're
a
talking
system in
about
or
lots
not.
of thousands of people. I mean, statistically, we are lucky that 40 years since we started the flying, for 40 years we didn't have an accident. But if we keep continuing to do what we are doing, it's only a question of time. Then you're going to have an accident. So how long are we going to wait until that happens? I think that you are mentioning a technical lack of capability, but I think that the underlying reason is a financial reason. Because if you could have designed a flying pad for 19, you could design a flying pad into 24 as well.
All right, we're at 3 minutes. Thank you, sir. Next, please.
I'm going to try my best here because my head's spinning a little bit and I have a lot of questions. The first is putting aside ILS or visual navigation, what do you think is the best route in terms of safety? Coming clear over 17 with a little more airspace below the airplane or over the buildings?
What do I think is
Yes,
the
what do you-
safest approach?
Yes.
I think the safest approach is the pilot flying the ILS for 19.
Okay,
Or the
no,
ILS
putting
for any
aside,
runway.
putting aside the ILS system, if you had carte blanche to come into the airport, would you prefer to come over 17 or would you prefer to come over the buildings? Or as a pilot, if a pilot wants to answer that question, what would you prefer? And I'm sorry to put you on the spot, and I do not want to shoot the messenger. I've been in the messenger position many times.
I can just tell you I'd prefer an instrument approach.
Okay, so, all right, so let's just say you prefer an instrument approach. What about the concept, it was the first gentleman commented, the engineer, I don't remember your name, I'm sorry. From the get-go, the test seemed flawed. What was going to define the success of that test?
That's a good question. I'm not really 100% sure how to answer
What
it.
was it going to be? And it's if you're given a situation where it's a lot easier, and it's a no-brainer, you're going to come in on autopilot and let it come in. It makes sense for a pilot. So it's a flawed test to begin with. You don't even have to answer it. You can follow it up at the next meeting. The next one is, can you simulate it?
Can you simulate the approach?
Yeah.
I believe it can be by flight safety. We don't do that.
Well, could that be arranged? Because at the end of the day, it's as the deputy mayor mentioned, 17 or not, and all of this 5 or 6 years prior, it was not going to work from the get-go. Wasted money, wasted time, wasted emotions, and lastly, not to be alarmist, but God forbid there is an accident across those buildings. It's not just the initial impact. It's a perpetual one. What it's going to take to get that going again. All the devastation surrounding it. And so this half-hearted effort, hearted might not be the right word, I'm thinking of another one, of that test, to get go, it's almost embarrassing. And I don't mean to insult you or anybody else. I'm sure you tried hard, but at a certain point, we're not experts. You guys are, and that from the get-go said this isn't going to work. So at the next meeting, whatever it is, whether it's the experts or not, is 17 better or not? And what's it going to take to get the ILS? And what's it going to take to get the ILS for the other runway? It's basic, very basic, and I do empathize with your position. I've been in a messenger position before, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, please.
Hi, my name is Gail Wells, and I live on Overlook Avenue. Question for you. How fast is a plane traveling as it's approaching a landing, say half a mile out from the airport?
Approximately 110 knots, depending on type of aircraft.
Okay. So a tenth of a mile, how quickly with the speed you just mentioned,
Going to be a math test later on.
yes, there's definitely, no, but.
A tenth of a mile, okay.
Yeah,
Let's
so
see
a
if I
tenth
can
of a
figure
mile, because I don't know the nautical, how many
Okay.
seconds? 1, 2, 3?
Let's go with regular miles.
Okay, so 1 to 2 seconds, maybe a tenth of a mile?
Probably in the vicinity of 3.5 seconds.
Okay. So a month ago today, I left work early, and I left work early because my building where I work is a tenth of a mile from Curo Road. Okay? It was devastating, it was frightening, and according to what you just said, I'm about 3 seconds away from maybe not having been here. I did the coordinates of longitude and latitude, and just the last 3 digits were different. In terms that I understand, I'm 2 warehouses away. So now you know where I was that day. The chaos that ensued was as alarming as what I was seeing with the smoke, the plume of smoke that engulfed the whole neighborhood, that came into our warehouse. We could not get our bay doors closed fast enough. It took 20 minutes from the time of impact to when we all left. Thank God I know southern routes, I went west, and I made it back to Overlook safely. Never so happy to be home. What I now realize is I live and work with planes all around me. I'm not talking about my workspace, I understand that. But what I'm thinking about is myself and my neighbors. The first responders, first of all, if anybody's been on Summit or Prospect, you know how congested those roads are. Just the first responders trying to get to us would be difficult, a very difficult challenge. If we're in our apartments and the smoke that burns from jet fuel is very different from any other kind of smoke. You choke, you can't see, it can be alarming and overwhelming. We really have, it's not just the potential of where the plane could crash and what would happen, it's the residual, as that gentleman just said, it's the aftermath. If we're lucky, it could happen on the high school football field with nobody around. But you don't know where a plane is going to land. I didn't know a month ago where a plane was, crash. I didn't know a month ago. I'm grateful to be here, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yeah, I just have a few people that, city manager make some comments, and somebody from the condo board is going to make some quick comments. Go ahead.
You want them to go?
You're there.
Yeah, that's fine.
Good evening. My name is Ted Ehrenberg. I'm the city manager for the city of Hackensack. My responsibility is for the safety and the operation of this city. And I get my direction from the mayor and council. And these conditions are brought to my attention probably weekly. And there's always concerns about it, and I thank the TANAAC board for members for setting this up and the FAA coming. But I have to be candid about a few things. If they get between 450 flights, and we have a sampling of about 260 flights over a 6-month period, that's not even a half a day of regular flights. So how do you make an assessment of all of that in 6 months? I know the friendly skies are up there, but down here, not so friendly, because the people in the city are scared to death of what could happen. And unfortunately, we have some unfortunate circumstances that people really resonate and understand that there's a real reality to this. But I have to tell you, I'm held to a much higher standard as the city manager to make sure that you people are safe. So I have to tell these people, I'm going to wind up the tip of the spear here because you folks aren't going to go away. If they think so, they're going to be sadly mistaken. Because I went to a condo board when I first arrived here as the city manager. I learned a lot that night. And she dyed her hair a little different color the last time I saw her. The Blue Hair Squad is not going to go away anytime soon here. These folks are tenacious, and they're very, very interested in just what the lady said in the beginning. I have my kids, my grandkids, I pay taxes, I have a responsibility to myself and to my neighbors in this community. And if Hackensack does one thing really good, is a sense of community. So I applaud you folks for taking the time to come out tonight. I would ask you any of your concerns to bring them to the city manager's attention. I know that the mayor and council are committed to this. I won't step back away from it. I work for you, and we're here to make a difference. But I have to tell you, 260 plus flights over a 6-month period, I don't think anybody here is going to believe that that's a proper sampling. Should be, at a best, a minimum of a year. And candidly, if it took all these years to do all this research to even establish this protocol in the beginning, the hard work's really done. We just have to make sure that these checkpoints, Omni readings, whatever that they refer to them these days. My father was into aviation. I'm personally not. But in either case, we should have a fair sampling and a fair shot at this. And I don't think the city got it. So I'm going to ask I don't know who represents the condo board that's going to speak? Connie. And I thank you folks. If I don't get a chance to see you personally on your way out, thank you for putting the time and the effort. And I applaud the condo board members who continue to fight the good fight to see if we can make this better. I thank everybody for their time.
Hi. Everything's been said. We really, really represent safety. We're worried about safety. We have 81 condos, high-rises rather. If one gets hit, it's like a domino. It's not going to be one. It'll be more than one. There was an accident in Teterboro, and what did the FAA do after that accident? Anything? What did you have to do? If there's an accident in Hackensack, in the buildings, or in high school, or anywhere, what do you do after that? That's what you have to do now. You can't wait until that happens. And, you know, I'm upset because the night I said an accident's going to happen, it happened that night. And I feel so bad for the guy that did it. I'm worried about human error. Human error is a big problem. You're saying now, and you've gotten me more frightened, because when you're telling me that they have to put certain numbers in their GPS or whatever you call it, and while they're flying, it's mind-boggling. It's like driving the car and using your GPS and using your phone, and we're getting tickets for that. What are they doing up there? That really concerns me and my group. I want to thank you all for coming. I'm a terrible speaker. I'm not good at it. But really try to get together. You have the brains. You have the know-how. And if you know the people that we can speak to, the planners should be here. The guys who made those flight plans should be here. And we need answers. That's the problem. We're not getting answers, and everybody is frustrated. And get it together. I mean, we can. You can do it. But it's going to be a disaster if something happens here. Thank you again.
Thank you. Do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, I just have a closing remark for this evening to kind of wrap everything up. First, I'd like to thank TANAAC for organizing the meeting tonight. We, the FAA, know it's important for us to be here. For those who are not familiar with what the FAA does, it was an opportunity to inform you at least a small bit of information, the beginning. So it's a beginning of learning everything on both parties. Us learning about what you're concerned about, what you'd like, and of course, us being able to tell you our limitations and ability to accomplish the tasks that you might present to us. It was also an opportunity to discuss, obviously, everyone's concerns and also our efforts with the quiet visual runway 19er. I would submit to everybody that it was at least a step forward. We may have to take several more steps, but it was at least one step forward. I don't know the time frame. I'm not an expert on design and implementation, but as I promised at the beginning, and we will endeavor to continue upon this path as a collaborative effort. I need to know what, besides safety, besides what your concerns are, is not just one community. How many communities surround Teterboro Airport? There's many. So as we hope to improve things for one community, we impact another community. So some of the things that you wish for are very difficult to accomplish because of the surrounding area and the density of the population. But I made a promise at the beginning of the meeting. I will ensure that I get a subject matter expert to explain the intricacies of designing approaches into the airport. I continue and will continue as the air traffic manager for Teterboro to work with TANAAC and address your concerns. And I would also encourage you to make your representatives bring those concerns to the TANAAC meetings. Your concerns can't be heard if they're not relayed through somebody. And I have a limitation. I can only visit, my wife only lets me out of the house one day a week. So, I can only attend so many meetings. But besides that, seriously, bring your concerns through TANAAC. And I am there at TANAAC. And I will pursue whatever courses I need to pursue to at least address your concerns and hopefully try to find a resolution. Thank you again for all your opinions and input. And hopefully I did share something that you learned about us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Real quickly, my closing comments, a couple comments.
Please.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mayor.
Since it's my meeting, I'd like to maybe ask, I do have a few of the members of my committee, of our committee. Paul, I see Paul, and who else is TANAAC out there? We have three. But at any rate, what I'd like to say is that I'm a little disappointed in as much as I thought we were going to get reasons why it was discontinued, and maybe some talk about the hope of the future, how it's going to be revisited. What there seems to be a very reluctant reluctancy on the part of the FAA, and I'm not taking a shot at anybody that's here, to recognize that the situation needs the attention. It's undeniable. Everybody's said that for years. It's over 10 years that it came before our committee, TANAAC. We can't deny that it's something that has to be looked at. But there's also the situation that was also brought up about saturation. There are other airfields in the vicinity. Not that I want them. There's an airfield that the Port Authority acquired upstate, just over the state line, Sampson, the old Air Force base. They can't make people go over there to use that. Now you got these helicopters around that the company executives, the CEOs of corporations can utilize to use an airfield like that to take a little of this pressure of that this area, southern Bergen County, is experiencing more and more each day. And there's Atlantic City. What would that be? 15 minutes away by a helicopter? The aircraft, that airfield is hardly used. There should be some effort to spread it out, a realistic, sensible effort. Everybody likes all these people that have the luxury of the sea of the corporate jets like to come into Teterboro because it's only 11 miles to New York City. 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. They bop over my house, over the little church on Moonachie Road. They bop in and out all day because it's such a convenience. At some point in time, our quality of life down here has to be appeased at the expense of these people. And that's the bottom line. That's the only way I can express it. They have to be able to give in to what they're impacting our communities by. And especially in a situation, although this is what I'm talking about saturation. But this meeting we've had is not going to be the last of it. We have to hear from the FAA again. And certainly the TANAAC will be part of that insistence on getting more information. I hope we can lead the way on it and accommodate everybody's feelings. But there has to be a little more attention paid to it, and maybe a recognition and understanding that it is a valid situation to be rectified. So that's all I have to say, and I say thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. TANAAC, the FAA. I want to thank the condo board for being here. City manager stayed. Man lives over an hour away. He's still here. Been here since 6 o'clock in the morning. He's still here. A few things I'm going to ask. One of them is the decibel testing that's done for these schools. I know it was done in the past. I'd like to see it done again because our children's education are paramount. And the fact that we have children who are being denied an education because of some of the noise situations that go on is becoming a problem. We need to deal with that. Whoever we need to talk to limit these flights, I know you can't punish them, but sometimes you might be able to twist their arm a little bit. And Sunday flights especially, I don't know why. I'm guessing the Sunday flights might be pleasure flights coming in on it because it's always late Sunday afternoon, 3 o'clock till about 8 o'clock at night. It's brutal. It's brutal. And if we could get some of that toned down, it'd be wonderful. But the most important thing is the flight path. And you know, I'm not going to beat up on you guys. I think the audience did a good enough job on some of that. And, you know, the mayor just mentioned how convenient it was for them to take a little puddle jumper or whatever, helicopter over. But their convenience is our inconvenience, all right? And that's got to stop. That's got to stop. It's gotten to a point now where it's coming to a fever pitch, and enough is enough. The ILS situation. One question I have, and I just got to ask this question, if you had ILS on that Route 17 route, would the 3,000-foot ceiling and 5-mile visibility still be a factor?
ILS systems carry a lower weather factor.
Right.
Weather requirement.
So they wouldn't need it. They could fly on the ILS system without requiring the 5,000 or the 5-mile visibility.
Correct.
Right. So if you had the ILS system on Route 17, that wouldn't even be a factor. The noise, this is the noise study from 2017. In Woodridge, it went up 0.2%. Over in Hasbrook Heights, noise went down 5.4%. Down in Little Ferry, it wasn't available. Over in TANAAC area, 0 change. 2 sites in Hackensack went up 1.5% and 1.6%. So we have actually gone up when other communities have basically stayed flat or gone down considerably. So, you know, the noise is going up. Facts are there. The accident, I have one question about the accident. I know it's a horrible, horrific thing, but has anybody done the data from the crash site to the landing? Was that coming into 19 from the south end?
The accident's presently under investigation, so
All right,
I can't really make any comments about it.
Let's just think about this, though, that the distance between the accident and where it would touch down on the runway. Now reverse it coming in the other way. If it was coming in from the north, all right, to the tip of runway 19, if you reverse that distance from the tip of the runway straight through Hackensack, where's that thing landing? I can tell you where it is because I've kind of done it. It's right over by Hiller School, Stony Hill Inn, right in that area. So that thing would have been dead center in one of our neighborhoods, and that's, something we think about. We think about that. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming, and we have stop sign syndrome. Who knows what that is? You have an intersection with no stop sign until there's an accident. 2 weeks later, there's a stop sign there. All right? That's what we're talking about here. So thanks again to everybody for coming tonight. You behaved yourselves pretty well. Thank you. And hopefully we'll be having another meeting soon. Thank you. Have a good night.
I'm not good. I never was. I love you.
Good. How are you? I haven't seen you with the grandkids lately.
Yeah, over there. Always.
Leo. Hey, Leo. Yes, sir. I came in. Why? Unlock the door. Why?